Hi everybody, I'd like you to join me today for a knife skills workshop. This also includes taking care of your knives. But before we get started, I'd just like to share with you like a number of different knives that I have, how I use them, and like what my preference is to use. So this was one of the original knives that I've had. It's an NHS knife. This is a Japanese knife. It was made by the Joshua Roth company, and I don't think this company is in existence anymore. So this is a hard, you're probably not going to find this. However, you can find this style of knife. It's squared at the end, and they come in this size, but they also come in a little bit longer size. So it's really be a traditional Japanese kitchen knife. And it's used for all kinds of different vegetables, and I like the little one better than the larger one. I do have a larger version of this, but I pretty much never use it, and so it hasn't even been in my cart here. I often will give that knife to somebody else to use. The little one tends to hold its edge a little bit better, and what's nice about this is you have stainless steel, but you see this like little thin part here that's a little bit darker. That's carbon steel. So the carbon steel makes it a little bit more delicate. I've had this for many years. Maybe this is like going on like 12 years. I had one prior to that I gave to like one of the kids, and I had that one probably like a good like 10-12 years. It's a great knife, and if you take care of it, it will take care of you for a really long time. The tricky thing is, because of the carbon steel here, when you use it, you do need to like wipe it right away, and then you need to follow that up with a dry cloth. You don't need to do that. Like I usually like wipe between each and individual cuts as I wipe my board too. But when you're finished and it's all said and done, you want to clean this right away, and then you want to dry it. Then I usually just let it sit out a little bit and let it air dry before I put it in its sheath. Now what I have here is really this beautiful sheath here that someone made for me. This is handmade by a good friend, and this fits really nicely in there. So one, you don't want moisture to get inside here because that wouldn't be good, and that would cause the blade to rust. But also, like if you leave this, it fits nice and tight too. If you leave this wet, then you're going to get more rust here. So not only is that, like aesthetically not good, it's just like not good for the blade of your knife. So that's like one knife that I have, and something I use. This is another small type of knife. So this particular knife, this is just a Cutco knife, and somebody gave this to me. I'm laughing about it because I remember Cutco was famous for knife salesmen that would like kind of fly around the neighborhood with their little case and say like want to do demos, and that I didn't even know they still made knives. This was a gift for me from a friend, a student of mine, and I think he gave it to me just because he said, like my other knives were dulling quickly, and he had one like this and he really liked it. This is just stainless steel. This has a pointed edge, so this is a Santoku's type knife. Not even sure where this is made. I don't know if it's made here in the United States or if there are Cutco's made elsewhere. You can Google that and find out. But it is really a nice everyday knife. The handle's a little bit longer, and it's very smooth, and it fits really well in my hand. So I often use this like for a day-to-day thing when I'm cooking. I'm in the habit of caring for the Japanese style knife, so I always like wipe it and clean it in between cuts, and I always at the end like finish up by cleaning my knife and then drying it, and then again like waiting to it is nice and dry before I put it away. But I have like this for this particular knife too, so both like fit really nicely in there, and yeah, it's just a great knife. So if you don't want to spend a ton of money and you want something that's reliable, then oftentimes these stainless steel blades are a little bit better. They're more durable than the carbon steel and just a little bit lower maintenance. This guy is a big chef style of knife, and I use it for vegetables. I'm sure chefs use it for other things, but this is just a German knife that I'm not even sure the name of the brand on here. It's like been used for so many years that like the little seal here is starting to come off. This is a very, very durable knife. It has good weight and good balance to it. It's kind of, again, a no frills knife. It was like very inexpensive, purchased in a kitchen supply store, because when we had large seminars and we were cooking for like big groups of people, and you know, like sometimes I had to like be in the kitchen, then I had to rush to go out to teach a class, and I had to cut like in large volumes. This was just like a very, very industrialized knife to use. So I could like go through a cabbage really easily. I wasn't worried if I was gonna nick the blade or anything on a squash. Just a little bit more durable, again, than some of the Japanese style knife. Now this is not the knife I want to use for delicate or intricate cuttings, but again, if you're cutting through like a winter squash, you know, like the round kabochas, or if you're taking the peel off of one of the butternut squashes, this would be my go-to knife. You know, like that way I can keep the edge on the Japanese knives a little bit more keen. This is just a small peeler. It's made by Mac. It has like this angled blade, but again, it's very nice for just like little like small things that, you know, like maybe you want to cut into a lemon or a lime and you don't want to use your kitchen knife, because when you cut into things like that too, you've got like this hard skin, and that too can dull your everyday vegetable knife. For your vegetable cutting, you really want your knife to be nice and sharp. Then this one comes from Corin. It's a store in New York. I hope it still exists. This is also a Santoku style knife. It's Japanese. Just a very, very well-balanced, well-rounded knife. And what you can see, what makes it good, interestingly enough, like the Cutco has this too. If you look here, the blade extends all the way through the handle here, and then it's like fastened here. You have like the little cuff here too. I do like these Santoku style knives because I think you could get in like really closely to a stem and just get a nicer cut. But for everyday other type chopping, this works well too. Okay, so yeah, before I get into the actual cutting here, this is a cutting board. I'm not sure what type of wood is it. Maybe hinoki or not, but it has a little stand here, and it was purchased from Toiro Kitchen. I really like it a lot because you can stand it up afterwards, and you know, like you want to take care of it like by wiping it and cleaning it really well, and just seems to work well with my knife. This guy here is a little like water stained. This is a bamboo board. Bamboo boards are much harder. So if I want to like slice a bread and use one of those serrated knives, or if I want to like cut down into something, again, like something harder, then I will use this. Sometimes I also use this type of knife if I'm doing lots of bits of sea vegetables. So like wakame, for example, you would soak that and you could line that up and do some cuts there. That because I may choose to use like the tip or the point of my knife just to like kind of come down the middle of a piece of seaweed. So then the little board here works better. But most day-to-day vegetable cutting, I really like this board. I just think it's like very, very well made. I have another board that's from a professional cooking school in Japan that I like a lot, but that board is just slightly more high maintenance. And the first board I got like that worked, which they said it shouldn't do. And it really shouldn't have worked because I'm pretty meticulous about taking care of, you know, like my cookware. So that's that with boards. You can buy this one from Toiro Kitchen. They have a lot of nice boards also on Williams Sonoma's site. But you can get a nice cutting board really, you know, like on Amazon. They have a number of different like Japanese things. You know, of course, you know, like if you want to go into a, you know, like kitchen store and see what they have line there. I usually don't go for the ones that you have to oil. In fact, I've never owned a board that you have to oil. Usually pretty much go for like these lighter style boards. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut into an onion, and we're going to do a half moon cut. A half moon cut is a very, very common cut used in cooking. So you use it when you're doing maybe soups, chunkier half moon cuts, possibly if you're doing a layering technique or a stewed type vegetable. I'll take like the end off because that's not going to be, it's a little too soft. And then also in sauteing. So first I take like the top off and I take the bottom off. I like to peel the onion by hand because I know some people will go right through it with their knife. I'm not a fan of that method because, again, that can dull your knife very easily. Then if you see the onion, you have like all these little folds and these little spirals right here. So usually I approach it from either that side or this side. This is relatively flat. That was like the connection piece. And I'm just going to take this, and this is like the tip of a spiral, and I'm going to go right down the middle of this onion, just like that. And then I end up with two nice halves. Put 1/2 off to the side. I'm going to take this part of the onion off simply because, like, if you would look to this, it's very flimsy and very, like you get a thin membrane there. It's just not going to be delicious, and, like it certainly won't cook up very well. So it's just not something I would use. If you were making a stock like we did the other week for our risotto class, then this is a perfect thing to just like hold on to because, like onion works really well in stock. So now you have half of a half, and you can see like how the little layers grow around it. This is the connection piece and grows out, like from here. So the next step would be to go down the middle. Then I have half of the half. Now I know in macrobiotic cooking, a lot of people would take this and go in from the side, but that can be like a little difficult for a lot of people, especially if you're new to handling a knife. Personally, I would rather err on the side of being safe, especially with people that are new to cooking and new to handling a knife, especially if you're working with children. I think it's great to involve your kids at a young age and teach them knife skills because it's a skill that they'll always have for the rest of their life. But you also want to be careful when you do that, as you don't want any accidents or anything. So what I've always done is I've always worked from the flat side here. So obviously this side, it's very easy to work from the flat side, but this side it's not. So we're just going to flip it around this way. And you're basically just going to go in line with all the little lines, cutting naturally like the way this onion grows. You can leave the connection on if you want little fans. So for example, say you would want to make like fans or pickles, or you want to do a bigger chunk that you're making a stew and you're layering that in there. Because that connection is pretty solid there. And even when it's cooked for a long time, you still may maintain that just like beautiful fan-like shape, and it's just like very elegant and nice to look at. But if you're sauteing or using this cut for soups, then you'd be taking that connection out like that. And that does not mean that you can't use that. Of course, you can still use that, or you can just save that for later. But if I do a soup, I would just like put that in whole like that. Then you're going to hold your knife like this. So I grip here, and you could do like this, or you could do, I'm a fan of holding just like right like that. You're going to have much more control over the knife than if, like you're back like this. I used to hold back like this. And in this particular store, Corin, one of the guys was a former chef, and now he's like, like an expert in knives and teaches knife school class. And I was having problems sometimes where my hand would get a little sore, especially when I was working like 10 12-hour days during seminars and teaching a lot. So he said that no, he actually made fun of me for a little bit, and he said, hold your knife like this, and he said, you're going to have better control. But I said, well, like I do have good control of it here, but he said, yeah, you're not going to exhaust your hand as much. So I would recommend holding right here, just like this. And then you're gonna go through and make the first cut. Now I could tell just that first cut that this back part of the blade here needs a little bit more love, and it needs to be sharpened a bit. Like, so the front part, again, often will maintain its edge, but the back part here could use a little bit more sharpening, and to make like the whole blade and the edge like more even when you're doing that. And here again, just coming through like that, so you can see all the little fan-shaped half-moon pieces. Now, what you can do is then flip it around again to the other side, and if you wanted to go chunkier, that's like a bigger half-moon. And you can go as chunky as you want, like something like this could go, you know, like potentially in a stew. I use this same cut if I were dicing an onion. So I would just like take this, maybe make a bigger cut like this, and then hold here and just go right down the line, and that fell, and making some more cuts. So ideally you don't want all this stuff, you know, like kind of like cluttering up your board, because you don't have like much room to move when your vegetables are left on the cutting board. So that's, you know, I just left them there for the camera to view, but generally speaking, that's a no-no. And I could do the whole thing. Don't drag your thing across the board. You can use the back side of your knife like this, but I wouldn't recommend doing this. First of all, you'll scratch a nice board, and secondly, you're gonna like dull your blade. Okay, so that pretty much are the cuts that you would use, you know, like on onions. And we tend to use a lot of onions in plant-based cooking. It's like, you know, like they're good for you. They relax and strengthen the nervous system. They relax and strengthen like the whole central organ system here. So, and you know, like honestly, sweet is the most balanced taste, and onions are just like really super sweet when they're cooked, especially when they're cooked a little bit longer. So you can really get a lot from using plenty of onions. You could get away with using a little less salt when you're making soups and when you're making just like different sautés, and that it's a winner. So we'll keep our onions. So the next thing we'll do is let's like show a matchstick cut. So what I did here is I have 3 different carrots here. This is like a Whopper, like a really big one. This is a thinner carrot. I couldn't find any loose carrots. I prefer the loose carrots that are grown more locally than the bulk carrots that you get in a bag. But I wanted a thin one just to show a matchstick cut. So when you are making matchsticks, choose something that's a little thinner. It does not mean that you cannot use, you know, like this. Of course you can. It's just that, you know, like you're going to have to work a little bit harder. So the matchstick cut, you place your root vegetable, and this would work like fine with any root vegetables, like whether you're using a daikon or a parsnip, a piece of burdock. So you can just like imagine any root vegetable that you want. I just think the carrot is kind of nice to show here. So the first thing you're going to do is you want to determine how long you want your cut to be. So if you want a shorter cut, then you're just going to go in like this. Wherever you place the point and the tip of this knife, that's going to ideally determine the length of your cut. So if I just do it short like this, and I cut there, make my first cut, all that's going to do is take the little tip off. If I want this long, because this is a very thin carrot, in some ways probably a little thicker carrot would be easier to show, but this is what I picked. So if I want a longer cut, then I'm going to like point this like way over here. Or maybe I'll even tilt my carrot a little bit. Generally speaking, you want to go about that length. You're going to go in just like that. So if I were to fan these guys out here, you would see that they're all pretty much the same in thickness. And ideally, that's what you want. Usually a matchstick cut is used in a saute method of cooking. Of course, you can like put it in some soups too. But generally that matchstick is going to be used in either a longer saute method or a saute and simmer method, or, you know, like a very quick stir fry type thing. So you want your carrots to cook evenly. If one's one size and one's another size, like really super thick, say I made a cut that was like thick like that, that and that are not going to cook in the same amount of time. But even though this is at the tip, and this larger piece can be adjusted to work with this. So this, you would just be potentially going one cut down the middle, and then you have two matchsticks. Then we go to the next one, and this you can get two cuts out of, right? But if you look at them, they're all the same. And so on, right down the little line here. There's two more. And I'll just like fast forward to the back end here and show you. Oops, yep, this is sticking. I'm gonna have to sharpen this knife, but I'll be showing you how to do that shortly too. So there you have everything all the same width. And that's gonna cook nice and evenly. And that's how you do a matchstick cut. Now, let's say you wanted to do a dicing method. A dicing method, you could potentially do this same cut here, ideally a little bit thicker, and you could go in and you could do something like this, put it on its side, and do something like that. They're pretty much the same size as well. Or, because that's on an angle, I'm just going to let that go. You could also just do the round method. Take that little tip off here. And then go down the center. You could take these two. You could half it again if you wish. And that way you can adjust what size they are. If you want to make it longer, you can. Or shorter. You could do bigger or smaller. So it came down like that, and I just wanted to do a chunkier style dice. So that's also known as a half round. And then if I took it in half like this, that's a quarter round. But even so, with these different cuts and different styles, I can mix that all together, and the dices are pretty much the same. That also is very important if you're making a dish, like say you're sauteing, again, diced vegetables like this, and you're going to add it to couscous, or maybe you're adding it to a quinoa salad, or maybe you're making a dish with millet in it and you want to cook that. And millet cooks a little bit longer, and the vegetables are going in there from the beginning, so that will be a little bit less, more forgiving, or like a barley stew or a farro stew. But if you're doing something where you're sauteing vegetables and you're adding that to a grain dish, or adding that to like a bean salad, and you want to cook it first, any quick type of cooking method, then you really need to be like very careful to try and get like all the pieces the same. And then like everything turns out a whole lot better when and cooked more evenly. And 9 chances out of 10, a lot of people that you're going to be feeding, it's not like you're on Chopped or Beat Bobby Flay or anything like that. So probably most of the people that you're serving are not going to know the difference. But like if you are trying to just like put your game up a little bit more, kick that game up a notch, then ideally you want to try to keep them even. Okay, the next cut I'm going to demonstrate is called a partial roll cut. So there's a roll cut and there's a partial roll cut. So when you approach this, it's the same. And this particular cut is usually something that's going to go into like a longer cooked dish. So a long steaming or a vegetable stew type thing. I know a lot of people like to steam root vegetables and then grill them or bake them. But either way, you're going to probably use a more of a roll type cut. And the way you would go about that is, again, you have your carrot here, and the size of your piece, again, is going to be determined by that first cut. Same as it was with like the size and the length of this matchstick. So you're approaching this the same way. Some of your carrots are not going to be perfectly smooth, but that's fine too. So I'm going to roll this little nut closer to my inside here, and I'm going to decide how big of a piece I want. Now keep in mind, the larger cut pieces are going to be something that's going to need to be cooked a whole lot longer. So I generally like to go like in between, especially if I'm doing root vegetables and I don't want to like cook something like forever. So just say like 20 minutes or half an hour. Half an hour, it's getting into that very long cooked time. So, but if you want to make a summer vegetable stew with like olive oil and different like herbs or some protein in there, like tempeh is delicious in there, even like seitan or just pieces of fried tofu, then I definitely would recommend using a smaller cut. So what we'll do today for demonstration purposes, we'll kind of go in the middle. So again, here where your knife goes, that's going to determine your first cut. And I'm going to take this right there like that. So that's always going to be your first cut. And then you have this flat part here. Move this to the side. So I'm going to take this and just turn it a notch closer to me, just like that. And this is facing upwards. And then I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to lay this right alongside, just like that. And you're going to get a little shape that looks like that. So you've got like surface here, and then a little bit of the backside. That's my favorite cut for like long cooked things, especially like long steaming or like stews that are boiled. If you were doing a vegetable stew, then I'm just going to use this piece again, then maybe you would just, or roasted vegetables, maybe you would choose to just do something a little longer, and it's a little chunkier, but there's more surface area here and more surface area there. That way you could steam it a little bit first, and when you grill it, you can, like more oil will stick to that surface, and you end up getting with a nice, rich, sweet taste out of the vegetable. So a lot of people probably don't give it a thought, but the cut of a vegetable really makes a huge difference in the taste that you're going to get and the type of energy that you want to receive from that particular dish. So here again, we have this, and if I wanted to take this, I could do again. You don't need to like take all that little peel off. That's fine. But you've got like 2 cuts there, but very different from this, even though that this was like a big fat carrot, right? So then we'll take this back. Next, I'll show what would be a full roll cut. So a full roll cut, unlike the partial, remember, we turn it up. A full roll cut, you take this flat side and you're going to turn this all the way back so it's like you're facing your heart region, your belly here. And then you're going to go in and you're going to do a cut just like that. Now that's a much bigger piece. That, again, you're going to have to cook for a very long time. A lot of people use this cut. I've seen it again and again in a lot of plant-based chefs and macrobiotic chefs. For me, that's just not my favorite cut. I don't find your vegetable to get as sweet. I find you're going to get a much sweeter taste like this. And again, even some of the long stewed vegetables that I've done where I add oil to it, this and this is going to give you a little bit more richness and a little bit more sweet flavor than this. Even when this is cooked long, because it's so chunky in the middle here, you're probably going to need to cook this at least a half an hour, if not 35, possibly 40 minutes, just for it to get tender and to really, get the flavor out of that you ideally would like. And then sometimes this little delicate skin of the carrot that you don't want to remove, because there's a lot of vitamins and nourishment in the skin, but that can get like a little wrinkled and a little dry. So It's your choice. You can try all of them at home and experiment with it, but my go-to cut is usually for long steaming and stews, the partial row cut, and then from stews where I do in the cast iron, this cast iron little pot with the wooden lid makes really awesome vegetable stews that where I make, you know, like mix this with like onion or mushrooms or even add like zucchini towards the end or other like green type of vegetables. Then I think this cut like works like way better. And those are our carrots and our roll cut, our slices, and our dices. Hi, I'm back and I want to show you some more on knife care and some how to sharpen your knife. So this is a whetstone. This is a smaller stone. I think this was a Joshua Roth stone. Don't worry about like the discoloration. That's just basically from a carbon steel knife. It has like two different things, a finer grade and then one that's just slightly more rough. This is a really super professional whetstone. It was a gift from our son-in-law. And again, one side, this side here, is a little bit, ever so slightly, a little bit more coarse than this side, but for the most part, this is a very, very smooth stone. Now, the way this works is if your knife is super dull and you let it go to that point where, you know, like it hasn't been sharpened in like months, I hope you're not doing that, then you would need to have it go to the coarse thing, and in some cases, in extreme cases, you may end up need to get it professionally sharpened. I've had a couple of my knives professionally sharpened. One was like very successful. Another time somebody sharpened my knife and it never held the blade properly again. So I'm very, very leery when that comes to pass. Probably why, you know, like when I teach, I'll often use like a fancier knife, and day to day I'll use a simple knife that's just like really easy to take care of and just keeps his edge. So this is the whetstone. It's called a whetstone because you want to keep it wet. Well, incidentally, this store, Corin, has like a really cool knife sharpening thing, and that guy I probably would trust because he has like this basin of water and does all kinds of like really cool stuff. I've seen different techniques of this. So the first thing I'm going to do is just like wet this. So one, I've seen people go up and down like this. I prefer to just like hold this evenly across the whole thing, and I go across like this. I even go as far as to count how many times I'm going over this on either side. And sometimes it only needs like 50 swipes on either side. I do it evenly on both sides because it doesn't have a bevel. I do have another knife in here that it's a big knife. It's not my favorite knife. And that has a bit of a bevel. So that ideally you would want to make that side a little bit sharper than the other side. It's a very large knife. It's heavy. So it's not something, you know, like, just not a fan of like something like that heavy, and the tip tends to be longer. So again, you're just going to hold this, and it's very simply, you're going across. Now this knife wasn't very dull, so it's not going to require, you know, like a whole lot of work to it. You can see that some of the debris is coming off. Probably means that, but not a ton of it. I've worked with some people's knives in classes, some of my students' knives, that it's just like, egads. This whole thing would be like really black, as you can see with this stone here. And then I just take it, and then I go about the same swipes on either side. So here again, you're just going to hold it here from tip to tip, and so that was about 25 swipes. Then I'll do 25 more. And then I'm just going to check it. So here, the top part, the bottom part needs a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is just concentrate a little bit on this bottom part. Just hold it. So I'm not going over the full thing, but just in that part here. And you can see too, there's a lot more of the carbon steel coming off of it. So I just did 20 there. And we're getting better. Okay, and then we just like put this back when you're finished. When I used to have seminars, I used to just like keep the stone in there the whole time because you're doing a lot of work. And when you're cutting a lot, ideally you want to sharpen your knife, give it some love at the end of the day, each day. So you don't want like this pristine, perfect rag when you're doing this because you are gonna get some stain on it. Take another cloth and just, then what you can do is get your board back and you can give it a test run. See how it's working. Looking pretty good. There we go. And notice too, when I'm cutting, I'm going through like this in a spiralic motion. I'm not chopping down directly. So here again. Still needs a little bit more sharpening, I would say. I can tell that it's just like kind of like catching somewhere in the middle there. Thank you.